Hi, my name is Fiona Maguire, and my partner Kayla Edgerly and I worked on Wildlife Crossings in Northwest Indiana as our capstone project. It is part of the Indiana Kelp Plan, which is a framework for identifying land conservation needs in Northwest Indiana. So we focused on identifying wildlife crossing locations to improve habitat connectivity across fragmented landscapes in Northwest Indiana. Our research examined criteria such as landscape typology, roadway typology, and high and low quality wildlife corridors. And using these factors, we identified possible locations for wildlife crossings throughout Northwest Indiana. Then each of us selected an individual site to study more in depth, and we developed both large-scale and micro solutions for each of these sites. So large-scale solutions include major infrastructure interventions, while micro solutions focus on smaller, more feasible strategies that can be implemented at the community level.
Hi, my name is Kayla Edgerly, and I'll be going over our process and informants. So during our project, we worked alongside key informants and first defined the core problem and identified focused species. We then researched wildlife behavior and mapped movement patterns alongside the region. After selecting our sites, we conducted site-specific analysis to identify unique needs and evaluate how the wildlife crossings could address those challenges. In order to better understand those challenges, we needed to understand wildlife. We looked into the impacts of wildlife vehicle collisions on both people and ecosystems. For people, the primary impact is economic. This is including vehicle damage and safety costs. For ecosystems, fragmentation can disrupt populations and lead to major imbalances. Within a system, there are two types of species, keystone and indicator. Every species behaves differently and sees the road as a threat. We found that there were 4 different types of ways animals reacted to this threat. We incorporated this research into our designs as we made sure the decisions we were making were sensitive to the ways wildlife moved through our landscape.
As part of our research, we looked at different types of wildlife crossings, which we categorized into large-scale and micro solutions to best fit our research and our sites. Large-scale infrastructure ranges from small culverts to major highway overpasses, and micro solutions include smaller strategies such as warning, signage, roadside lighting, and traffic calming measures. So by combining both approaches at each of our sites, we created multiple strategies that work together to improve habitat connectivity by providing locations for wildlife to cross and also slowing down traffic. To identify our sites, we overlaid high and low quality wildlife corridor layers with roads, railroads, managed lands, and landscape typologies. Our primary selection criteria were the wildlife corridors and their proximity to managed lands, and we focused on areas where fragmented habitats intersected with managed lands and then used landscape typologies to guide our design decisions. For the site in Indiana Dunes National Park, the main issue identified is the fragmented landscape due to infrastructure. There's a railroad running next to Dunes Highway, which creates a double barrier between 2 wetland areas. And these wetlands are really important habitats, but right now they're very disconnected. From our site visit and analysis, it was clear that wildlife trying to move between the 2 wetlands are forced to cross both the road and the railroad tracks. So overall, the site has a large connectivity problem, which is driving the design of the site. The focus species for this site is the Blandings turtle, which relies on both wetland and upland habitats and travels between them, especially during nesting season. And because of these patterns, they're particularly vulnerable to roads and railways. And this species was selected to guide the design, and the main focus is on strategies that support their movement patterns. The main intervention at this site is a culvert that runs underneath Dunes Highway and the railroad. This creates a direct connection between the 2 wetland areas and allows wildlife to move safely without crossing on the road. The design includes a clear line of sight through the culvert to encourage use by species like the Blandings turtle, and in addition, riprap is placed along the roadway and rail edges to discourage animals from accessing those areas, and it guides them toward the crossing. To support the culvert, there are also several proposed micro-solutions along County Line Road and Dunes Highway. These include rumble strips and flashing signage to increase driver awareness and encourage lower speeds in areas with high wildlife movement. Barrier fencing is also used to guide animals toward the culvert while preventing them from accessing the roadway directly. Gravel is used alongside the road to discourage species like the Blanding's turtle from nesting near the roadway. And additionally, elements like temporary speed bumps and lighting help improve visibility and further calm traffic. So altogether, these solutions reinforce the effectiveness of the large-scale system and improve overall safety for both wildlife and drivers.
The other site we chose was Deep River County Park. This park is in Hobart, Indiana, and is known for its trails, water park, and much more. The park is split in two by the busy U.S. Route 30. The road stems off of I-65 and has a history of deer vehicle collisions. Neither the park users or wildlife are able to cross. In order to solve the pedestrian and wildlife issue, I looked into the Robert L.B. Tobin Land Bridge for inspiration, as this crossing supports the needs of both humans and wildlife alike. An overcrossing seemed to be fit for this area at Deep River because the road is at a lower elevation and overpasses are most fit for deer. When visiting the site, we found signs of use and evidence that wildlife were not successful with crossing the road. The road is 112 feet and we found trash and dead animals alongside it. There is an existing underpass that allows for the Deep River to move through, but this tunnel is not inviting to the park's wildlife. The park is abundant with many different types of wildlife, including the white-tailed deer. This keystone species is critical as it poses the largest threats to people in this area. In Lake County alone, there were 285 deer vehicle collisions in 2024. The large-scale solution for the site is this mixed-use overpass. For the design, I wanted to make sure that the pedestrian path was connected to the other end of the park where the water park is located. The pedestrian corridor is separated from the wildlife corridor on the bridge by a 4-foot berm. This overpass uses the existing grade as the road is lower than the north end of the landscape. The overpass is fit with native planting that replicates the surrounding landscape so the wildlife do not notice the transition. On the sides of the bridge, there are sound barrier walls that help mitigate sound. The wildlife are funneled into the bridge by wildlife barrier fencing. This bridge would also be coupled with signage that notes the use so that the pedestrians do not use the wildlife corridor. For the micro-solutions, I proposed a series of strategies that help keep the wildlife off the road, like the wildlife barrier fencing that is tall enough to prevent deer from jumping over and is buried 2 to 3 feet underground to prevent critters from digging under. If deer do by chance get stuck within the fencing, there is a deer ramp that allows exit without re-entry. The spot for this ramp was chosen based on the wildlife travel route, which is a representation of the most probable path that follows the water corridor and land cover. In addition to these strategies, it is also suggested to improve the existing underpass with a dry shelf, great for sunlight, and sound barrier walls. Overall, along the road, the planting should be kept clear 30 feet from the road and taper in order to help wildlife stay away from the traffic. Overall steps to implement a wildlife crossing. This diagram represents the real-world process of determining what a wildlife crossing project would look like. We start by identifying the issue and gathering data on species and site conditions. Then analyze collision hotspots to guide decision-making. From there, we select the appropriate crossing type, develop the design, and incorporate micro-solutions. After construction, the crossing is maintained and monitored over time to evaluate its effectiveness. Thank you for your time and listening to this presentation.